Well met, adventurers, and welcome to the heart of the dungeon. Today I want to answer a question that I read on a Dungeons and Dragons forum I subscribe to that has a really good question that I think many of you would run into from time to time. Now, this question may come up more at the very beginning of gameplay as opposed to down the line. However, anytime you introduce a new player, or maybe they change classes, or maybe they're away for a while and come back, this may be something that you run into. It's a great question. The person, I won't name them in case they don't want to have their name revealed, but they asked, what are your opinions on what I like to call backstory features? And it's these quotes. They mean features that your PC asks for, sometimes on par power-wise with things like racial or class features or feats, or asking for an exotic weapon and proficiency of that weapon being the cultural weapon of a character's people, or some sort of starting feat or something because of a backstory. I paraphrased the question a little bit, but basically what they're asking is giving players little perks and buffs or extra items because of their story. So if a player came to you and said, you know, I'm a paladin and I belong to a specific order, and we all have these magical shields that give us, you know, +1, or, you know, allow us to rebuke evil on sight, and it ups my turn undead capability. This is something that will come up, and it's a great problem to have, because this means that your characters are actively wanting to do something different. They want to have something that makes them unique, something that makes them stand out, but you do have to be wary of when they're asking these questions, because you're going to run into people that want to power game or min-max, or just try to get some sort of advantage over the other players. And sometimes this is one of those things that can end up breaking your game without you realizing it early up front. So what you're going to want to do is have a conversation with that player. Ask them about the story that they had in mind. If it's a very thinly put together, flimsy story of, oh, well, you know, again, going back to the paladin, our paladins always have the shield. Okay, but wouldn't just a sigil or some sort of marking on the shield make more sense rather than this order of paladins that's super overpowered and unchallenged? You know, why would they have that? Wouldn't a marking make more sense, especially if they're a religious order? They don't want to draw too much attention to themselves. So those are the things you have to kind of ask your players those questions. Really kind of dig into them. See how much of the power gaming is trying to surface to the top. The other thing you may want to ask them is, you know, where do you see this going? You know, if you do get the shield, what does that do to the story? What does that mean for your character? You know, that they have this overpowered item or feat or bonus. You know, what is it? Where is that going? Where do you see that? What's the obvious flaw in them having that? That's the question I like asking. What's the obvious flaw? And it's a good question and a fair question, and probably the best question you should be asking if you're not already, because you want them to think about what kind of trappings that they're getting into. Are they going to be obvious tropes that are going to box in the game and make it broken or not fun? Or are they going to be the kind of things that end up putting them on the hook for something? They may end up finding out that by taking this feat and this ability that their DM has plotted against them, and some nefarious people are going to take note, especially if these are low-level characters and they're getting items they shouldn't. I once played a game with a guy who just all he wanted was a ring of 3 wishes. And he worked out a deal with the DM that he could get a ring of 3 wishes starting off. However, 2 of the wishes had already been granted. And he was playing a rogue character that he kind of molded into this super Indiana Jones thief style person, with a darker twist in that he didn't want to put it in just any museum. He wanted it in his own private hoard and collection. So he had this ring of 3 wishes, and the trade on the outside was that he lost an eye during the transaction. So like someone shot him in the eye with an arrow or sliced his eye or something. But that was the trade. That was the deal. An evil DM trick on there was that, you know, it's like a monkey paw. He had one wish, and no matter what he would have wished for, it was probably going to go kind of rotten. So knowing the DM, this wasn't like he was springing something new on him. The player knew the DM, so again, he really thought it out. He took the deal, but the entire time he kept trying to, you know, oh, should I use the ring? Should I use the ring? Should I use the ring? And, you know, I don't want to waste it, and I don't want to get into trouble by using it at the wrong time where the DM can use it against me. And these are things that's a good interaction between the players, because he knew the risks of taking the goods, and he knew what could be at stake for agreeing to this deal. So the DM and the player had a good understanding of each other. However, in your games, maybe you don't have quite the full rapport with your players, so don't try to pull anything nefarious on them if they're not expecting it. Unless it's something that would be generally understood as something, you know, if you give them a ring or a necklace of fire with the fireball, you know, necklace of fireballs to a player that's really crappy at throwing things, you know, with super low dex score, you might want to tell them, I'll give this to you under the understanding that you don't want to throw this, you know, whatever you work out. But the big tell here is that you want to have that conversation with your player. You want to make sure that the player understands what the obvious flaws in taking this are, and you may want to bargain out some sort of trait trade. So again, you know, one player had to lose an eye to get the ring of 3 wishes, and the ring only had 1 wish left in it. You may want to make sure that your player has gone over into seeing how it integrates into the story the best, because again, if you're not having fun, then it's not worth it at all. There's really no trade. So I guess what I'm getting at is that if it seems to have a place in the game and it makes sense, and there's an easy way to massage it in, say okay. Give your players a little boost, a little pat on the back, something that fits their character's race or class or their backstory. If anything, it's a great way to encourage them to think of what are their strengths and weaknesses, what is their backstory, and how is that going to play into the story going forward. You may unlock new things, new resolve into the role play that you would not have gotten before with this, and you've given them a little extra buff or a little extra magic item, something small, but it's a fair trade because you're enhancing the story. So that's something you definitely should consider. So if it makes sense, do it. If it kind of seems out of place, but not horridly so, you're going to want to compromise on that. You're going to want to make a bigger trade. You know, if the character's like, I want this, you know, this big bad thing, great, that's going to cost you an arm and a leg, maybe even literally. I've seen players, when they play Shadowrun, have to trade out augmentations, but they're not good augmentations. So they lose limbs and they lose their essence, and it's not a super great trade, but they end up getting something that they really wanted to start off with. So again, you can make those compromises. If it doesn't really make a whole super lot of sense, but it makes sense to compromise, do that. But if it seems crazy and there's really no good compromise, there's no fair trade, you're not getting better story out of it, the players are not going to be better off for it, they're just getting a super big buff out of the whole game, they're just trying to tag you along for power gaming's sake or min-maxing, be a good friend, be a good dungeon master, and don't let them be the ones to break the game for you. Don't let them be the ones to suck out all the fun. Feel comfortable in telling them no for something like this. Now, I've said before, always tell your players yes. But this is something where you may want to consider saying, I'm sorry, but there's no way I'm going to give you an unbridled, full-bore Ring of 3 Wishes off the bat, and there's no trade involved, and there's no reason for it. Or there's no reason why I'm going to give you a +4, flaming longsword and you're level 1. Just doesn't make sense. I'm not going to give you a goose that lays the golden eggs. So again, just have the challenge there in place. Well, what are the obvious flaws? What are the, ask them, how do you see this playing out in this story? How does this work going forward? I understand what it means behind you, but how do you see it playing going forward? And that's how you kind of present to them in a fair and honest way of, but in the game, really, is that something that would be honestly there? Compromise where you can, and then at the very last stance, you can tell them, no, I'm sorry. And you just tell them, simply put, you're gonna break the game. It's not going to be as fun as you think it will be. You're gonna get a good laugh out of it now, but you're not gonna enjoy it later on. But what do you guys think? How do you handle that situation? What seems to be your best case scenario for dealing with players that want favors out of you, and even if they try to justify it with their character's backstory? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you guys in the next video.